Hi there. You are about to listen to me talking and talking and talking for over 20 minutes. And in this video, I didn't pull any graphics or anything that you should actually look at other than myself. So if you feel like only listening to it, it would be a possibility. And if on the other hand, you prefer looking at my beautiful face, well, very reasonable. By all means do that and enjoy. And welcome back once again to Utopia. So for the last couple of months I have seen the same question repeating again and again in the comments regarding how to learn German. More specifically, questions about what is the most efficient way and the fastest way of learning German, especially for doctors, in order to get to work as quick as possible in Germany. Because that time between the moment you graduate until you start working, you could consider it a wasted time or losing time, and therefore you want to learn it quickly. So in this video I will try to address those questions and give my opinion on that, but bear in mind that I am no expert when it comes to learning languages, especially German. And I cannot tell you what's the fastest way of learning German because I did it very slowly and very badly, and I cannot tell you what's the most efficient way of learning German because the way I did it was very much not efficient. But what I can do is tell you what I did, what I consider that I did right, and most importantly, what I consider I did wrong. I think you will agree with me. And based on that, I hope that you can get to your own conclusions. I will also give you my own conclusions, and hopefully those questions will be addressed. Warning: the following is a rather detailed story about a boy that kept making and repeating stupid mistakes often and on purpose. Listening to this might make you feel frustrated and embarrassed. He was as well. Alright, let's get to it. Let's start this story the moment I decide I want to work in Germany. It was in my fourth year, halfway through it, January 2016. I believe it was a good idea to make this decision this early. I still had approximately 2 years and a half to learn German before my graduation, and therefore, theoretically, I wouldn't waste time after graduating. So I started going to some classes, A11, A12, very slowly, not committing a lot of my time. I still had to do my classes anyway, just going to some German classes for the beginners. That summer, between 4th and 5th year, I decided to go to Germany for 1 month to do intensive classes. There are some companies that offer you these intensive classes in summer. Well, they offer it at all times, but as a medical student, you can only take them on summer. And it's like 6 hours a day, every day. The groups are very reduced and you learn very fast. You're all of the time practicing. And after classes also, you go out with your colleagues and you keep talking German. So you learn very fast. And in 1 month, I got my A2.1. But not only I got the A2 level, I also felt very comfortable speaking German. And I had this feeling that everything was going to be okay. I had this feeling that learning German was going to be easy peasy. I had, however, no idea of what was coming to me. And so the 5th year of medicine starts, and I was still confident that everything was going to be all right. Given that I still had to do all of my classes and that 5th year was a tough year, I decided that year not to study any German. So I didn't go to any classes, and I convinced myself that later on everything would be okay. I really kept thinking that I just needed 1 more summer to somehow become fluent in German. So as a compromise, I decided to enroll in some Erasmus in Germany. By the way, off topic, Erasmus is a very, very useful tool when it comes to learning languages and expanding yourself all over Europe, making also contacts when it comes to working. And also, did you know how many times you can do Erasmus during your studies? It's not just once. You can do Erasmus in the preclinical part of your studies. Then during the clinical part of your studies, especially during the last year, you can do an Erasmus for a whole 6 months or 1 year working abroad in the hospital. On top of that, there's the short Erasmus just for summer. And if that wasn't enough, even after you graduate, you still have a period of 2 years in which you can do an Erasmus called the postgrad Erasmus. In my case, just between the 5th and the 6th year, I did 3 Erasmus. And back on topic, I decided to do 2 Erasmus trips during my 6th year. Well, more concretely, in the summer between 5th and 6th year, I decided to do an Erasmus in a hospital in Germany to get some working experience and also to practice my language, thinking I was going to become fluent. And I think this is the perfect moment to introduce a concept that is going to repeat itself in this video very often. It's called slap on the face, or running against the wall and hitting yourself against it on purpose. You will understand now. So 5th year finishes and I go on summer to this hospital in Germany, and I get there and I speak to my boss. 5 minutes conversation. Well, it was mostly just him talking for 5 minutes and me pretending that I understand. Guess what? I understand nothing. And then I have to talk, and I thought I could say something, but guess what? It's been 1 year. I don't speak any German. I just couldn't talk anything. Everything I had learned until that point, all of that confidence that I had, that I thought I could speak, it was gone. There was nothing there. And that was the beginning of my first slap on the face. For the following 2 months, I would be there in the hospital as a practicant, and I would try to work, but I couldn't understand what I had to do, and I couldn't really ask a lot of questions, and therefore I would just be there awkwardly, trying to do my best but not really doing anything, and I would be also ignored by the doctors over there because I was useless anyway. I don't know if this happened to you during your medical studies, whenever you have to do a rotation in a department and you get this resident who has a lot of things to do and doesn't bother teaching you, and then you are there sitting there awkwardly doing nothing. I don't know if it ever happened to you. Well, it happened to me for 2 months, but it wasn't the resident's fault. It was my fault. Also, I refused to talk in English with any doctor, young, old, no matter what, no matter if they speak English or not, I refused to do it. What made everything a bit more difficult. So, summer ends and the 6th year starts. Classes, practicals, thesis, a lot of stuff to do. But this time, I am going to do my German classes. So I enroll, I don't know what it was, B1, I guess, but truth is I had forgotten the grammar from A2, but I enrolled B1 anyway, and I just tried to push through because I knew what was coming. The second half of my 6th year was 100% practical in a hospital, and I was going to do it again through Erasmus, again in Germany. I, of course, tried to learn as much German as possible during these months, but let's be honest, there's only so much you can learn while doing your classes, your thesis, and everything else. And so here it comes. I go back to Germany, but this time for 6 months. Different hospital, different people, same problem. In its most minimal expression, I can do some things, I can communicate a bit with the patients and with the doctors, but I'm still pretty useless. So other practicants, other students working over there as a 6th year, they were doing cool stuff, talking with patients, talking with doctors, really learning a lot. And I was there doing a bit more than before, but still pretty much just struggling and suffering. Anyway, somehow I make it through the 6th year of awkwardness and I go back to university, do my finals and graduate. Yay! Great, I'm a medical doctor, I can't get to work, but wait. Problem, my German is still bad. I don't have a B2 level, I haven't done the Goethe's exam, and even if I did, then I would have to get a C1. So I'm doing pretty bad. And you could argue that I already had a B1 level and then I did 6 months in Germany talking every day in the hospital, so I should know more. But here's the thing, the gap between two levels, say A11 and A12, is very small in comparison with the gap between B11 and B12, or especially B12 and B2. Also, at this point, I am way too invested in the German language. I am not willing to give up. I am not coming back to Spain because you can't really work right away. You need to do some stupid exam anyway. And I am not thinking about going anywhere else. I am focused in Germany and I have to push through. So I spent another couple of months getting some German classes, ending the B1 and starting the B2. Also, remember those 6 months I spent back then getting a taste of reality? Yeah, those. Well, somehow that wasn't enough because during those 6 months I applied for my 3rd Erasmus program, the so-called postgrad Erasmus, and it would consist of going to 3 different hospitals, 2 of them in Switzerland and 1 of them in Germany, to keep improving my German. The idea behind is that I just needed to keep practicing until I get it right. For those of you who don't know, in Switzerland they speak 3 languages. They speak Italian, French and German. I was intelligent enough to go to the German side, but the German they speak in Switzerland is not like the normal German that you learn in class. No, they speak their own dialect. Now, I was aware of this and decided to do it anyway, being the idea behind that I would get some experience in Switzerland and see whether I like it or not. Also knowing that in Switzerland this C1 exam called the Fachspracheprüfung does not exist. So anyway, I went to Switzerland and the situation repeated itself. Now, in this case, my German was better. I was somewhere between the B1, B2 level, and I already had some experience working abroad in Germany, so it's not like I couldn't say anything. I could understand and I could speak already. But the thing is that what they were talking, I couldn't understand. So I could ask questions, but I couldn't understand the answers. Now in Switzerland it's self-understood that you can talk to them in German and they answer to you in Swiss, and you have to understand their Swiss. You don't have to speak the Swiss German, you just have to understand it. And that I didn't know. I thought they would accommodate themselves, understanding that I don't understand the word, but that wasn't the case. So I spent another couple of months again in an awkward situation where, even though I was trying to work and to be useful and to practice, the result was that I couldn't practice because no one really wanted to teach me or show me anything because I couldn't really understand them. Now, in defense of the workers in Switzerland, this is not their fault. Imagine you are a resident and you have a ton of things to do. You have to do paperwork, you have to see your patients, you need to report to your superiors, and there comes a student who doesn't understand your language. And why would you bother wasting your time, the time you don't have, accommodating yourself to his or her needs? You can try, but eventually new students come every month and you get tired of that. So in the end, I guess you just ignore them. I guess that's a good explanation why that happened. Luckily for me though, not all of the workers over there were Swiss. There are also many foreigners from all over Europe who spoke the normal German we learn in class. So it wasn't wasted time. Still very difficult, very uncomfortable. My fault once again for biting more than I could chew. Anyway, I went through that. I prepared for the B2 exam, the Goethes exam. I did it, I passed it, and I moved on for the FSP. When it comes to preparing for the FSP, my approach was downloading all of the theory that I had to download, which I hope you have seen already. I made a video about it and I have a Drive folder that you can check out. And so I thought that if I can just prepare like that, it should be fine. And so I prepared for a couple of months just reading that theory, knowing what I have to do in the 3 parts of the exam. Then I took the exam and I failed it. I must say I didn't have any problem whatsoever understanding the examiners. Both in the first and the 3rd part I could understand everything quite well, and given that I had been freestyling my German for 2 years already, I could also answer their questions and get out of the situation easily. What failed me was the theoretical part of the exam, the 2nd part. The vocabulary and the way I wrote was just wrong. And it's not really a surprise. I hadn't really learned the German properly. I kept having this approach of getting my hands dirty, going to Germany and learning it just like that. And it is fine, but when it comes to the theory, to the grammatic ground on top of which you build the language, I kept hopping in and out of classes, in and out of courses, going for a couple of months and then not anymore for 6 months and then back at it again. And I never really got those solid grounds properly. And I paid for that. Anyway, I prepared for the exam for another 6 months and I eventually passed it. The official German Approbation came like 2 months afterwards, and 1 month after than that I was already working. So what conclusions do I draw from my experience? First of all, I wished I started earlier. Starting with 2 years ahead of you is good, but 3 or 4 or 5 is better. When there's a clock ticking and you know that there's a deadline and you know that past the deadline you're wasting your time and that you could be more efficient, this brings a lot of stress, which is good to make you learn faster, but at the same time it makes the experience very stressful, and that experience could otherwise be fun. But anyway, you make the decision to go to Germany when you make it, and you cannot really go back to the past and change it. You can only wish you did something, but it's already too late. So if by any chance you have not decided yet, I would recommend you to make a decision, an informed decision, and once you make it, start learning from that moment and don't waste any day. A second conclusion I get is that going to classes, theoretical classes, it's important. There are grammatic rules that need to be learned that are the foundations on top of which you build all of the language. And this does not actually only apply to German or to languages in general, also applies to medicine or anything you study. There are foundations that you need to get right. And if you don't get them right, then you can keep progressing, but it's so much slower and it's so much more difficult and it's so frustrating not to really understand why you have to say something in a special way or why something is like this or like that. And there is a reason why, but you just never really learned it. I personally skipped many classes and hopped in the courses in and out, not finishing them or spending months between them. I got those foundations so wrong, and I learned my German mostly from what I hear from people. I hear someone saying a special phrase 20 times, and eventually I take it and I bring it to my own German, but I don't really understand why it has been used that way. So when it comes to writing, for example, I have a huge difficulty because I never really got those basics correctly. My conclusion number 3 is that even though theory is important, it is not everything. And here's the thing I believe I did right, which is spending some time in Germany to get more fluent. If you know the theory very well and then you put it yourself in front of a person and you cannot talk, then it's great that you know every single word, but if you cannot put them together in less than 30 seconds, then I am glad I spent some time in Germany, both listening to the people and also improving my pronunciation. People who take a completely theoretical approach, they know how to write everything, but they don't really speak to people, and when they speak to people, they are very slow, and that's also not great. So I believe I did that right. My problem, however, was the timing. I got the timing very wrong. It is very inefficient to train your ear to hear the German sounds if you don't understand what those sounds mean. And the same applies to training your mouth. It is very important to know how to say the words, the pronunciation. But if you don't know what words to say, then you don't say any words. And then you cannot practice your pronunciation when you are not speaking. So the timing is very important. I am not saying you shouldn't go to Germany to practice your German. I'm just saying you shouldn't force yourself to go through the most difficult thing at the very beginning. I think baby steps is important. I think you can go to courses. I think you can go for 1 or 2 months, but maybe not straight to the workplace, maybe in a more relaxed way. The fourth conclusion I got applies to many other things than just German, applies to life in general, which is to be consistent. Learning German is not like riding a bike. If you stop, you will forget it. And then you will go back to it and you will have to do the work twice and it's going to be frustrating, and then you will drop it and then you will go back to it and again do twice the work. If I could give you a recommendation, it would be to not stop. I took so many breaks while learning the theory that I could have compressed all of my learning in maybe 2 years, but instead it took me almost 4 years just because I kept taking breaks. Other than that, answering some questions from the beginning of the video. How long does it take to learn German? Well, people say in general that it takes 2 years, and I guess I agree with that. Me personally, it took about 4 years, but I think you know already why. I made many mistakes, I did many stupid things, and I paid for it. But if you were to study consistently, get your theory right, and do some practices, in about 2 years you should be fine. If you study very, very hard, you can learn the whole German language all the way to the B2 in about 1 year to 1.5 years. And then you could take the next 6 months to prepare for the FSP, the C1 medical exam. That would be realistic. Can it be done faster? Well, yeah, some people do it faster. It really just depends on how much of your time you commit to it. Another question I saw is, should I commit to the German language first or to the medical language at the same time? My answer is clear. First, get your German right, and then you can start with the medical German. To memorize how to write a patient's report by heart without really understanding why you're using such words is a recipe for disaster. I speak from experience. Good, I think I already said everything I had to say. As it often happens, someone will make a very good comment and I will wish that I had addressed that in the video, but it's going to be too late. So check the comments, maybe someone has a very good question and I get to address it down there. And that's going to be it. Just remember not to give up. Remember that it's possible. I did it and I did everything wrong, so you can only do better. Have a lovely day, stay happy, stay healthy, and see you next time. Bye.